Hello, everybody. Today we will be looking at one of Javokhir Sindarov, the recent candidates winners, Eon's Old Losses. This is the latest classical loss of Sindarov I have seen, and just so I can analyze it, I have also created a video so that we can all see when Sindarov last lost and what went wrong and what he's doing now. So I will show this game, Sindarov's loss, and then I will show another game in the second part, which was one of Sindarov's wins. So let's get right started in. Let's get started. Sindarov kicks off the game with d4. His opponent is Ivan Chaparinov. Sorry if I mispronounced any of their names. Knight f6 played, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3. And then here Chaparinov goes for a Tarash, semi-Tarash. And sort of I feel maybe the reason Sindarov lost this game was because he didn't go for the main line, which is cd5, cd4, queen d4, ed5. There's first of all there's this line which it goes e4, de4, queen d8 check, king takes d8, knight g5, bishop e6, knight takes e6 check, f takes g6, bishop g5, king e8, bishop b5 check, knight c6, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, queenside castles. But this line, honestly, it's sort of hard to win as white, which is why I recommend just playing it out slowly with bishop g5, bishop e7, e3 castles, bishop e2 a6, bishop h4, knight c6, queen d3, queen b6, castles. The reason we can just sort of give up the pawn per se is because if queen takes b2, the rook a b1, queen a3, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, knight takes d5, queen takes d3, knight takes f6 check, g takes f6, bishop takes d3. White is clearly better here because of black's crippled structure. Pawn structure is one of the most key elements in determining the evaluation. But luckily for black, he can make sufficient counterplay with rook e8, bishop e2, moving the rook out of future rook a d8, and then rook e4, bringing some pieces in and also preparing rook a4, attacking a2. But unfortunately, cd5 wasn't played, which would have probably given Javokhir Sindarov an excellent position with good winning chances. But unfortunately, instead, e3 was played. E3 is like, it sort of allows black to get away with allowing her Tarash and then changes it into the Yusupov Rubinstein system in the Indian game. E3, dc4 was played, bishop takes c4, a6, castles. One move that could be considered is just e4, cd4, knight d4, b5, bishop b3, bishop b7, e5, knight e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, castles. Some lines like this, not this, but queen takes d1. But simpler yet is just to go bishop d6 here. So e4 is an interesting move, but better is bishop b3, and then now b5, e4, and then black doesn't really want to play c4 because after bishop c2, these pawns are sort of pushed too far. Unfortunately, instead, Sindarov castled. This is also a good move though. b5, bishop e2. I think the bishop would have done better on b3, but it doesn't matter that much. Bishop e2, knight bd7, d5, knight d, bishop e7, knight f6, queen f6, a4, b4, e4, h6, e5, queen e6, b3, rook d8, bishop e2, knight b6, queen c2, bishop e7, e5, knight d5, bishop c4, castle, rook e1, rook e8. And then here, I would like you to attempt to find the exchange sacrifice that Sundar found in order to maintain the balance, which is rook takes d5, knight takes d5, knight f5, rook e6 was played. Here, Sundarov played knight e3, which is a good move. Knight takes e3, rook takes e3, uh, queen d7. Sort of the reason Chaparinov didn't move his rook is because then f4 and his pieces are very weak. He just wants to keep the blockade because if bishop takes e6, like let's say queen d7, if bishop takes e6, like now white has a terrible bishop, and black can just come in and trade the queens with queen d1, check, queen takes d1, king f2, f e6. This pawn is weak, this pawn is weak. The a5 and b3 pawns are extremely weak, so black would just be winning. At first, even I didn't understand this, but it comes to make more sense why Chaparinov went for this pretty amazing exchange sacrifice, even though it isn't really an exchange sacrifice. So Sundarov knew this. Then queen d2, rook d2, queen d1 check, rook e1, queen 2. And I believe it would have been a draw if Sundarov hadn't gone bishop a1. Because Sindarov wanted to play on here probably because Chaparinov is 100 points lower than him. So naturally he wanted to go bishop a1, but personally I feel king h2 here might have been a better way to play on. The rook d2 takes d2, queen takes d2, bishop takes e6, f takes e6. Although queen c4 still a draw. So but then Chaparinov started to seize an advantage with rook g6. The reason this rook can't be taken is because queen takes e1 check, h2, and queen takes not a1, but rook d7. Just defending everything. Or you may ask, why not e6? And that is because bishop d6 check is there. F takes g6 would even be losing to e7 check, king e10, e takes f8 equals queen. So Sundar went g4 here, which is probably a little bit too weakening. Rook e6, f4, bishop e7, f5, bishop h4, rook e2. So sort of in this endgame, perhaps bishop c4 could have been played here, although it's pretty similar. Sundarov had to keep his bishop, his dark squared bishop, and try to bring it around. Like bishop e5, white is even better due to king f3. So bishop g5 has to be played, and bishop b2, and white is just somehow coming in. So then g5 has to be played, then bishop e3, bishop d4, and then just bishop d2, sort of just trying hard to bring the bishop in. Like let's say king e8, You could just go king f3 or just bishop e1. Unfortunately, Sindarov made a mistake. I think he might have been in time pressure at this point. I'm not completely sure. And traded. Yeah, I think this endgame was beyond hope to draw because these two pawns are extra pawns, but they're separated. Like they're if it was a D and an E pawn, maybe D6 check, E7 could be threatened, but here there isn't much of a threat. And here F5, I want you to figure out why it cannot be taken. Okay, king takes F5 cannot be played because of G3, and then there's just no way to stop G2. Okay, there is bishop F1, but then rook H1, bishop G2, rook H2, bishop E4, G2. So that was the end to one of Javokhir Sindarov's last losses in classical chess over 7 months ago. It is truly inspiring how Sindarov recovered from this loss and hasn't lost a single classical game for the past 7 months, if I'm correct. And now he is the winner of the candidates and will challenge the world champion Gukesh Damaraju to become the world champion. Thank you for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe so I can continue making these videos. Thank you so much. Bye.